Hello, welcome to today's lesson. In today's lesson, we're going to look at blood groups and blood disorders. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the ABO blood groups, explain the importance of determining the blood groups and rhesus factors, explain the donor-recipient compatibility of blood groups, explain the importance of screening the blood for purpose of transfusion, and investigate common blood disorders. Blood groups or blood types. So when you look at the blood groups or the blood type, we're basically looking at how blood can be classified. That is based on the presence or absence of certain antibodies or even antigens. So one of the most common ways in which blood can be classified is based on the presence of antigens, immunoglobulin A and immunoglobulin B. So based on those antigens, we have the classification of blood in the ABO blood group system. So according to this blood group system, we say that a person can have 4 different possible blood types. So that is, a person could be a blood group A, there could be a blood group B, there could be a blood group AB, or there could be a blood group O. So whether you are AB, or you are O is determined by the type of antigens that you have present on your red blood cells. So maybe a question would arise to say, what are antigens? So antigens are basically chemical substances that could either be proteins, carbohydrates, they could be glycoproteins, they could be glycolipids that will lead to the generation of antibodies. So depending on which of these types of antigens that you have on your red blood cells, we're saying that you could be classified as an a B, or you could be an O. So when you look at people who are blood group A, it simply implies that they have got antigen A on their red blood cells. If you're blood group B, you have got antigen B on your red blood cells. If you're blood group AB, meaning that you have both antigen A and antigen B on your red blood cells. But if you are blood group O, it simply means that you do not have any antigens on your red blood cells. So think of O as being a 0. So it means antigen 0, meaning you are blood group O. Importance of determining blood groups and rhesus factor. So a question would be asked, why is it important to determine the blood group and the rhesus factor? So when you look at determining of blood groups, it's important when you look at um, processes such as blood transfusion as well as transplants. So in blood transfusion, we're basically looking at the process by which blood is gotten from one person and given to another. So the person that is giving the blood is known as a donor, while the person receiving is known as a recipient. So the two blood types or blood groups need to be compatible for that blood transfer to be done. So as we look at the next slide, we're going to be looking at donor recipient compatibility. That's why we'll look a lot at which blood groups are compatible with which others. Then in transplants, we're simply looking at a situation where an organ is gotten from one person and given to another. So we're saying that even as organs are being transplanted, they need to be moving between people who are compatible with each other. Otherwise, if they're not compatible, it leads to what is referred to as organ rejection. So in organ rejection, it is where the recipient sees this new organ as something that is foreign and starts fighting against it. So you find that the blood supply to this organ is cut off and the organ will slowly begin to shut down, or it will begin to die. The other thing that is determined is the rhesus factor. So when you look at the rhesus factor, it is basically a blood antigen. So remember, we said that blood groups are determined by the presence or absence of certain antigens. Like the ABO system, we're looking at antigens A and antigens B. But then when you look at the rhesus factor, we're looking at the presence of what is known as the rhesus antigen. So the name rhesus factor, if you've been doing your read-up, you'll find was gotten from a monkey, as the rhesus monkey was the first organism where this antigen was discovered. But later on, research showed that this antigen is also present in human beings. So a person either has this antigen and is said to be rhesus positive, or they do not have the antigen and is said to be rhesus negative. So the rhesus factor of a person or a child is determined by the rhesus factors of their parents. So if you have two parents who are rhesus positive, all their children are also going to be rhesus positive. If you have one parent who is rhesus positive, the other one is rhesus negative, all their children will be positive. If both parents are rhesus negative, all the children will also be rhesus negative. So now a question would be asked, what's the importance of this rhesus factor? The rhesus factor comes into play or is important when we're looking at the rhesus factor of a female. The danger would be there if a female is rhesus negative and has got a partner who's rhesus positive. If you can remember what I've said that when you have a parent who's rhesus positive and the other is negative, their offspring are all going to be rhesus positive. So if you happen to have a situation where a mother is rhesus negative and then her partner is rhesus positive, and of course they go on copulate, have this child, the child is going to be rhesus positive. So meaning that the child is going to carry the antigen while the mother does not carry the antigen. So now what is the danger in that? So what will happen is that the mother's blood is going to start rejecting the fetus. The fetus will be seen as being foreign because it is different from the mother. It has the antigen that the mother does not have. So meaning that the mother's blood will begin to now produce antibodies against that rhesus antigen that is in the fetus. So to produce antibodies, remember that antibodies are produced so that they go and fight. They are soldiers that are there to fight off any foreign material. So in the first pregnancy, the mother's blood starts producing these antibodies against the rhesus antigen. So the first pregnancy might be okay, quite right, the child is born. But if this couple conceives another child, that other child is in danger because the mother's blood now already has these rhesus antibodies within her bloodstream. The antibodies are ready to fight. Okay? So what will happen that in the second pregnancy, these antibodies against the rhesus antigen are going to cross the placenta and start attacking the blood of the fetus. So the fetus will be seen as this foreign material. So if you are looking at countries, you are looking at the fetus basically being an enemy to the country. Okay? So this fetus is being seen as something that is foreign. So those antibodies that the mother has produced against the rhesus antigen will cross over the placenta and attack the fetus. So at the time of birth, this fetus will suffer from what is referred to as hemolytic disease. Okay? So hemolytic disease would usually lead into death. So what happens is that it's more of the blood supply to the fetus is being cut off. So the fetus is not receiving enough oxygen. Remember that it is through the blood that oxygen will be transported. That is with specificity to the red blood cells. So when the blood supply is being cut off from the fetus, so the fetus is not receiving as much oxygen as it should receive. So to combat this, that child needs to undergo a blood transfusion as soon as it is born. And what would usually happen is that if this condition is not detected in this second pregnancy, so it could be in the first pregnancy, it is not detected. If that woman continues to conceive more children, she would usually have miscarriages. I'm sure you've heard of certain situations where this couple have got one child and they cannot conceive anymore. It's miscarriage after miscarriage. So one of the reasons might be the rhesus factor. So as you plan on getting married, or if you are married, also check for your rhesus factor with your partner. So remember how it moves. If two people are both rhesus positive, their offspring will all be positive. If one is positive, the other is negative, their offspring will be positive. If both are negative, their offspring are also going to be negative. So most I like to think of it, the rhesus factor is really important when you look at the female because she'll be the one carrying these children. So look at a female who's compatible with you, who you'll be able to have children with the same rhesus factor. Now let us look at donor-recipient compatibility. If you can remember from the previous slides, when we looked at blood transfusion, I happened to mention that the donor and recipient's blood needed to be compatible for a blood transfusion to be successful. So when we look at blood compatibility, we're basically looking at the capacity of um, a blood recipient to receive the donor's blood without leading to clumping or agglutination. So in clumping or agglutination, we're basically looking at a situation where the blood cells from a donor and recipient stick to each other. So you have a reaction between the antibodies and the antigen. So you have the antigens on this donor's blood that are reacting to antibodies produced by the recipient's blood. So when these two stick to each other, they lead to clumps being formed in the blood vessels, meaning that blood will not be able to freely flow. So what that implies is that any organ that should be receiving this blood will be blocked, so there will be no oxygen reaching those particular organs or tissues. Nutrients will not be able to reach. Waste products from those organs or tissues will also not be able to be removed. So this blockage actually in the blood vessels might lead to a stroke or even a kidney failure. So it is very important that we know the donor recipient compatibility. So in looking at the donor recipient compatibility, we consider the antigens and the antibodies that are present in a particular blood group. So when you look at blood group A has got antigen A, meaning that it's going to produce antibodies against what is not it, which is B. So meaning that blood group A will have antigen A but will have antibody B. So who can a blood group A person receive from? A blood group A person can receive from an A and an O, but they can donate to an A and an AB. A blood group B person has got antigen B and antibody A. They would be able to receive from a B and an O, but can only donate to a B and an AB. A blood group AB person has got antigen A and B. So AB has got both antigens. So they will not produce any antibodies because whichever antibody that they produce will be able to attack them since they have both antigens. Then an AB person can receive from a blood group A, they can receive from a blood group B, they can receive from a blood group AB, and they can also receive from a blood group O. From this, you're able to see that this AB is receiving from every other type of blood group, isn't it? So we refer to a blood group AB person as being a universal recipient. They can receive from whichever kind of blood group because they do not produce any antibodies. So regardless of the blood group that is introduced into an AB, it does not produce any antibodies because it has got both antigen A and B. But a blood group AB person can only donate to another AB. I hope that is clear. Then we have blood group O. A blood group O person has got no antigens, but they produce antibodies against A and B. So a blood group O person can only receive from another blood group O, but they can donate to A, B, AB, and O. So you're saying that a blood group O person is donating to every other type of blood group. So refer to a blood group O person as being a universal donor because they can give their blood to any person. So why are they able to give their blood to any person? Because their blood cells do not have any antigens. So they are not going to lead to generation of antibodies. I hope that is clear. Previously, we had looked at the importance of determining blood groups as well as rhesus factor. So now a question arises. Apart from determining blood groups and rhesus factor, which we have seen that is important in cases like blood transfusion, in the same process of blood transfusion, we see that it is also important to screen the blood. So why is it important to screen blood for transfusion? So it is important that blood is screened for transfusion so that we reduce the risk of transmission of blood-borne infections. So we are reducing the risk of transmission of things such as HIV as well as hepatitis B. So these are blood-borne infections. So as we screen the blood for transfusion, we're checking if there are any infections that can be passed on from one person to the other. We're not just checking for the blood groups for the sake of compatibility, but we're also checking for the presence of any infections that can be transmitted. Blood disorders. There are a number of blood disorders that um, could be found to affect a person. But from all those, we're going to look at leukemia, sickle cell anemia, as well as hemophilia. So in leukemia, we're basically looking at um, a blood disorder in which the body produces a lot of immature white blood cells. So we know that white blood cells are part of the immune system. They're there to fight off infections. They're there to basically protect our bodies from invasion. But what happens when people suffer from leukemia is that they produce a number of these white blood cells that are actually immature. So they end up overcrowding the system but are unable to fight off infections. So leukemia is also referred to as cancer of the blood cells. The other blood disorder that we have is sickle cell anemia, which is an inherited disease where a person has got what is referred to as abnormal hemoglobin. So if you can remember your cell biology well, under specialized cells, you said that the cells that transport oxygen are the red blood cells, and they have the ability to do this because of the presence of a certain protein that is referred to as hemoglobin. But then people who suffer from sickle cell anemia have got a type of hemoglobin that forms a sickle shape, especially when it is in low oxygen levels. So when it forms that sickle shape, it is not able to transport as much oxygen as it should. So meaning that a person who suffers from sickle cell anemia has got the inability to transport sufficient levels of oxygen. The other blood disorder we have is hemophilia, which is also an inherited disease. So in hemophilia, we're looking at a blood disorder where a person bleeds for prolonged periods of time because they do not have normal or they have poor blood clotting factors. So certain blood clotting factors absent, such as factor 8. There's also factor 9 that might be absent or missing in such a person, so therefore they bleed for abnormal periods of time. Imagine having a simple cut and bleeding to death because your body is unable to produce these blood clotting factors. In today's lesson, we have looked at the ABO blood group system. We have also looked at the importance of determining blood groups versus factor. We have looked at donor recipient compatibility, the importance of screening blood for transfusion, as well as blood disorders. So this marks the end of our lesson. If you have any questions, do so by leaving them in the comment section, and remember to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you.